Have you ever felt like you're busy all day, constantly checking off tasks, answering emails, running errands, but then at the end of it all, you're left with this kind of lingering feeling of, well, what was that all for? Or maybe despite having more conveniences and distractions than ever, you sometimes feel this surprising lack of deep, real satisfaction. It's almost like we're constantly doing, but rarely just being.
And that's spot on. It's this paradox, isn't it? And it's something many of us grapple with pretty much daily. And honestly, it's a question people have been asking for ages, from ancient philosophers right up to modern psychologists. So today, we're doing a deep dive into a really groundbreaking work that offers, well, a truly counterintuitive solution. It's Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Flow. I've heard that term.
Right. And what's so fascinating about his work is the core idea. Happiness isn't something you just find or chase after. It's something you actively, consciously create. So our mission today is to explore how we can maybe transform everyday experiences, even the boring stuff or the challenging things, into these deeply enjoyable, growth-producing flow states.
Oh, okay. Let's unpack this then. So happiness isn't some, external reward or a state that just magically happens to us. Because, it feels like for centuries, people have been searching for it like it's buried treasure, something you acquire. What's the core problem with that kind of approach, according to the book? Why does chasing happiness directly often feel like, well, chasing smoke?
Yeah, that's a really vital point to get clear on right away. True happiness, or what Csikszentmihalyi calls optimal experience, you really can't pursue it directly. It's like the philosopher J.S. Mill put it quite elegantly. Ask yourself whether you're happy and you cease to be. It's an outcome, right? Not the goal itself.
Interesting. So asking the question ruins it.
Kind of. And Viktor Frankl, the well-known psychologist, he echoed this. He added something like, success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication into a course greater than oneself.
So what they're both getting at, and Csikszentmihalyi too, is that the key isn't trying to control external events. Those are largely beyond our reach, often just chaotic, right?
Totally.
Instead, the real path to, let's say, enduring contentment lies in gaining control over our inner experience, what's happening inside our heads.
Controlling our inner experience. Okay, that sounds incredibly powerful, especially when you think about how often we feel like we're just reacting to whatever life throws at us. But the practical question is still there. How do we actually do that? What does consciousness even mean in this context? And what are its basic mechanics that make this control thing so crucial? Right, this is where we get into the nuts and bolts. So the book describes consciousness not as some, mystical thing, but as a really effective, self-directed biological process. It's basically our brain's filter. It's constantly sifting through this huge amount of information from our senses, our thoughts, letting us focus and make sense of the world. It really shapes our reality moment by moment. And here's the kicker, the fundamental limit that really defines how we experience life. Our nervous system. It can manage, at most, maybe 7 bits of information at any one time.
7 bits. That's it. Wow. That sounds incredibly specific and honestly pretty limited, especially with everything coming at us today, notifications, emails.
Precisely. Yeah, think about that. In a world just constantly bombarding us with stuff, emails, social media, demands, our own worries, that's a tiny, tiny bandwidth. So this bottleneck means our attention, which the author calls our psychic energy, isn't just a resource, it's a scarce resource. He says we literally create ourselves by how we invest this energy.
Psychic energy, okay.
Now, when this energy gets disordered, right, when information conflicts with our goals or just pulls us in too many directions, that's what Csikszentmihalyi calls psychic entropy.
Psychic entropy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can almost feel that, just hearing the phrase, that inner chaos, that feeling of unease when everything inside just feels jumbled and clashing.
Exactly. It's that internal noise, that mess of conflicting thoughts and worries that just eats up our limited attention. The book shares this great example about a factory worker named Julio. His job involved really intricate soldering on an assembly line. Normally, he was super efficient, often finished early.
Right.
But one day, everything was off. He was struggling, making mistakes, getting irritable with colleagues. Why? Well, he'd had a flat tire on his car that morning, and he just worried nonstop about how he'd get home, get to work the next day, the cost of the repair. That worry, that psychic entropy about the tire, it just absorbed so much of his psychic energy, his attention, that he couldn't focus on his work.
Wow.
His job, which was important and usually something he could focus on, was totally derailed by this flat tire issue running wild in his mind. It completely disrupted his inner order. It's a perfect example of how external stuff, when we let it, hijacks our most valuable resource, our attention.
Okay, so if psychic entropy is this inner chaos that just eats our attention, what's the opposite?
Yeah.
How do we get to this optimal experience or flow state the book talks about? It sounds like the antidote we all need, right? Especially for Julio's situation.
It absolutely is the antidote. Yeah.
Yeah.
The opposite state is optimal experience or flow. This is when our consciousness is like harmoniously ordered. Our psychic energy flows effortlessly, completely invested in whatever we're doing. But here's what's really important to grasp. Flow isn't about passive relaxation, like zoning out in front of the TV. It's active engagement.
Active, right.
The book puts it clearly. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. Think about a swimmer trying to beat their personal best, focused on every stroke, shaving off seconds, or a violinist completely lost in mastering a really complex piece of music. Every note just feels right. It's being so absorbed that nothing else seems to matter.
That makes so much sense. It's not about being idle. It's about being fully immersed, truly present. So what are the key characteristics then, the essential ingredients that tell you, okay, this is flow?
Well, there are several key elements that pop up again and again when people describe being in flow. First, you're usually facing tasks you feel you have a decent shot at completing, but they're still challenging enough to need your full attention. Not too easy, not too hard.
Okay, that balance.
Exactly. Second, you're able to concentrate completely on what you're doing, just total focus. And this focus is possible because third, the task has really clear goals. You know what you're trying to achieve. And fourth, it provides immediate feedback. You know how you're doing as you go along. Think of a video game, right? You know the objective, and the game instantly tells you if you hit the target or missed. We kind of need to bring that clarity to everyday stuff.
Yeah, immediate feedback is huge.
Definitely. Fifth, there's this deep, almost effortless involvement. It makes you forget your worries, forget the everyday hassles, and even, kind of paradoxically, forget yourself. Which leads to the sixth element. You feel this strong sense of control over your actions, like you're really mastering what you're doing. Seventh, concern for the self just disappears during the activity, but, and this is wonderful, your sense of self actually emerges stronger afterwards.
Huh. Lose yourself to find yourself? Kind of.
Pretty much. And finally, your sense of time gets altered. Hours might feel like minutes, or sometimes minutes can feel stretched out as you're intensely focused. When all these things click together, that's when you get that deep enjoyment and meaningful engagement.
Wait a second, you said enjoyment.
Mhm.
Is flow just about enjoyment? Because, I mean, isn't pleasure what we're usually after?
Yeah.
We tend to mix those up, right?
Sure.
But the book seems to draw a really sharp line between them. Can you clarify that distinction? Because it seems pretty fundamental to understanding this optimal experience thing. And let's be honest, pleasure sounds way more appealing on the surface.
That's a crucial distinction, absolutely. And it's where a lot of our usual thinking about happiness kind of goes off track. Pleasure, eating when you're hungry, resting when tired, maybe passively watching a show. It's basically restorative. It brings your consciousness back to order after some need or desire popped up, gets you back to baseline. But critically, it doesn't really lead to psychological growth. It doesn't add complexity to who you are. It's just homeostatic, keeping things stable.
Okay, so pleasure is like hitting reset.
Right. Enjoyment, on the other hand, that's characterized by forward movement. It involves novelty, accomplishment. It's what you feel when you've gone beyond just basic needs, when you've stretched yourself, learned something new, achieved something unexpected. That adds complexity to your sense of self. It makes you more, well, you. And flow experiences consistently produce this deep enjoyment, not just fleeting pleasure.
I see. Enjoyment is growth. Pleasure is just relief.
That's a good way to put it. And this distinction leads us to this really fascinating concept of the autotelic personality. Autotelic meaning self-goal, someone who finds rewards within the activity itself. And what's truly remarkable here is that the book gives examples of people who manage to generate flow, real enjoyment, even in the absolute worst, most bleak conditions imaginable.
Like what kind of conditions?
Well, there are accounts from concentration camp survivors who found ways to structure their attention, find meaning in tiny acts, maybe tending a hidden patch of weeds like a garden, or helping another prisoner in some small way, finding a challenge within horror. Or think about blind individuals who report intense flow from activities like reading Braille, playing music, or even something like meticulously restoring old chairs, finding deep satisfaction in the skilled, focused work itself.
Wow. That's incredible. It totally flips the script, doesn't it? On what we think we need externally to be happy or satisfied. It's not about the circumstances nearly as much as we think.
Precisely. It's about that internal process of engagement. The book even mentions this homeless man, Rai, who, after fleeing war, felt his whole life was this search for identity. He lived on the streets, but found intense focus and meaning in prayer, in self-discovery, even in just the challenge of surviving day to day. These challenging conditions actually became a constant source of concentration and, for him, inner satisfaction. These people managed to transform incredibly bleak situations into satisfying, even joyful experiences just by structuring their attention, setting clear challenges, and matching them to their skills. It really points to a deep internal locus of control.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Isn't some of this just common sense, maybe repackaged a bit? And while it sounds amazing for, extreme athletes or artists or these truly extraordinary people you mentioned surviving horrific things, what about someone with a really mundane, boring job or a super busy parent juggling a million things at once? Does this flow state feel a bit out of reach for regular everyday life? Maybe even a little idealistic sometimes.
That's a fair point, and it's a very common reaction. And the author, Csikszentmihalyi, he directly addresses this. He argues that optimal experience depends on the ability to control what happens in consciousness moment by moment, which means it's less about what you're doing and much, much more about how you approach it. It's about the mindset, the way you engage, not the specific activity itself.
So it's about the how, not the what.
Exactly. Take Professor Meir Linetz, a physicist mentioned in the book. He had to attend countless academic conferences, and let's face it, many of them were probably incredibly dull. So what did he do? To combat the boredom, he turned the tedious talks into this intricate mental game involving finger tapping patterns. He created his own internal challenge.
Finger tapping, seriously.
Yeah. He allowed just enough attention for this personal game to find flow, but he was still present enough to catch anything genuinely important being said. He basically imposed a complex mental structure onto an otherwise passive, boring experience.
A secret finger tapping game. That's actually brilliant. It's like finding a loophole in boredom. It really does underscore that the how is way more important than the what, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Or think about Joe Kramer, a welder in a South Chicago plant. His job was classic, repetitive assembly line work. Could be soul-crushing, right? But instead of just enduring it, he actively transformed it. He made it a personal challenge to constantly beat his own performance records. He worked out routines, tried to shave seconds off his time, aimed for a more perfect weld, tried to minimize waste. He didn't just do his job, he actively worked towards mastering it. And he found deep enjoyment in that mastery, in the continuous process of improving.
So he made the repetition itself the challenge.
Precisely. The author makes it really clear that any activity, literally anything, can be transformed. You just have to consciously set clear goals for yourself, maybe establish some personal rules for the game, and consistently match the challenges to your developing skills. This applies to household chores, writing emails, dealing with traffic, even interacting with your family. It's all about taking conscious control of where your attention goes and injecting intention, injecting challenge into every moment you can.
I'm already thinking about my overflowing email inbox now. Could inbox zero become my next flow challenge? Maybe I need to time myself like Joe Kramer or turn it into this kind of sorting game like Professor Linetz. That actually feels incredibly practical. But, okay, turning a flat tire situation or assembly line work into flow, it still sounds almost like a superpower. Are there common pitfalls, like specific mindsets or things that prevent people from finding flow even if the conditions seem right?
That's a crucial question, yeah. Because while the potential for flow is pretty much universal, our ability to access it consistently, well, that varies. One major pitfall is simply a lack of intentionality. Just letting our attention or psychic energy get constantly yanked around by external demands or internal worries instead of actively directing it. If we don't set clear goals for our attention, it just defaults to that psychic entropy we talked about.
Right, just drifting into chaos.
Exactly. Another big one is that mismatch between challenge and skill. If a task is too easy, we get bored. If it's way too hard, we get anxious or overwhelmed. Neither state is flow. Finding that sweet spot, that just manageable difficulty, that's really key.
Not too easy, not too hard. Goldilocks zone for the brain.
Kind of, yeah. The book also points to the mindset of always seeking external rewards over internal satisfaction. If you're only doing something for the paycheck or for praise or maybe just to avoid getting yelled at, you're much less likely to find flow. Your attention is divided, right? It's focused on the external outcome, not on the intrinsic enjoyment of the process itself. So cultivating that autotelic personality we mentioned, one that finds purpose and enjoyment within the activity, that's really the ultimate goal. It's about shifting from, oh, I have to do this, to, okay, I choose to engage with this, and I'm going to find a way to make it interesting, make it a challenge.
That's such a powerful reframe. It really brings us right back to that initial question about satisfaction, doesn't it? That it's something we actively cultivate, not just something that randomly happens to us. It puts the agency, the control, squarely back in our own hands. It gives us a real path to shaping our own experience.
Yeah.
So, okay, wrapping this up, if you remember just one thing from this whole deep dive, what's the absolute core message?
If there's one thing to take away, it's this. Real happiness, deep satisfaction, isn't found by directly chasing pleasure or external success. It's fundamentally an inner condition, one you cultivate by learning to consciously direct your psychic energy, your attention towards meaningful challenges. Challenges that stretch your skills just enough. It's about transforming ordinary moments, even difficult ones, into opportunities for growth and that deep sense of enjoyment. That's the essence of flow, and importantly, it's a skill. It's something anyone can develop with practice. It's about actively designing your experience of life, truly, moment by moment.
I love that. It's so simple on one level, yet really profound. It completely shifts the focus from what happens to us to what we can actually do with what happens. It gives us that agency back. Thanks so much for helping us unpack these really powerful ideas today. It really shows that genuine satisfaction is, well, an inside job. And if you're curious, if you want to dive even deeper into these ideas and maybe start transforming your own experience of life, you can definitely find links to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's amazing work, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, right there in our show notes.
Yeah, and we'd genuinely love to hear from you. Let us know down in the comments. What's maybe one area of your life where you think you could apply some of these principles to find a bit more flow? Could be a commute, maybe daily chores, or even tackling that stack of paperwork you've been strategically avoiding. We're really eager to hear your thoughts.